athletes. In this video, we're going to explore the introduction to our side plank exercise. Now, this is actually a very critical exercise for torso stability, and it is one of the foundational exercises for many of our programs. Now, as we talked about in a couple of different videos, it's important to recognize that as humans, we move in 3 dimensions. We move forward and back, side to side, and in rotation. And so when we look at the function of the torso, the function of the abdominal muscles, their job is to resist movement in all 3 of those planes. So one of our primary exercises is the plank, to resist motion in this particular movement direction. Well, we look at the side plank as being a very similar component. We're teaching our body to resist side-to-side action. And we hold our initial exercise for prolonged periods of time, as it allows you to build volume and comfort, working through some breathing patterns, and just generally to develop control in this particular movement sequence before we progress to elements that are much more challenging. Now, I'm going to quickly demonstrate the exercise. I'll outline a lot of the visual components, and then we're going to move into some of the internal components. What should you feel and where should it be coming from? So I'll demonstrate sort of head on first. So the first thing we're looking at is elbow position. It is really important that we have a vertical arm slot. So I'll exaggerate it, but imagine that my arm was on an angle. As soon as I lift up, my arm is going to want to slide. And therefore, it's no longer about the torso control, it becomes about not falling over from the shoulder. So just be really mindful that elbow right underneath the shoulder at all times. In terms of second position, we need to be mindful of where the legs are going. So we have a set height, right? Our skeleton is predetermined. So our setup during the side plank is also predetermined. If the arm is vertical and our legs are stacked, we should know exactly where our feet are supposed to go every single time. Now, in terms of the foot angle, we actually have a couple of manipulations that we can make. For most individuals, their shoes are made up of rubber and cloth. Well, if my foot is sideways, the cloth is on the ground, and the cloth has low friction and actually wants to slide. If you turn your foot ever so slightly and dig the rubber edge into the ground, you'll get a lot higher friction, and it'll help to hold you in place. So just notice that I'm digging my toe in, or digging the outside of my foot in, and that will allow me to get into the good position. So now you have a general idea visually what it looks like from the front. Now I'm going to do the same thing from the side. So what we're looking to see is a completely straight line from ears to ankles. So when we lift, we should see a straight line all the way through. Many athletes start to default into a hips back position, or they start to rotate either the shoulders or pelvis either up towards the ceiling or down towards the ground. You want to be extremely mindful that all joints are stacked. So once again, observing head on, ankles are on top of each other, knees are on top, hips are on top, and shoulders are on top. Everything is in alignment. So I know that I've already thrown a lot of information at you. You're starting to see it from the front, from the side. But ultimately, the most important piece of this conversation is what muscles should be working? Where should this work be coming from? So, as a group of athletes, we can have a conversation about a series of muscles called the lateral chain. There's posterior chain, anterior chain, and lateral chain. Basically, the muscles that connect down the side of the body. So we have our big back muscles, we have our obliques, the side of the butt, even some like calf and lower body muscles. But recognize that the biggest ones, the most important ones, exist sort of in this area of the body, basically from ribs to pelvis. So when we're performing our side plank exercise, we want the obliques to be getting the largest percentage of work. We want them to feel the challenge and fatigue. So if you're starting to feel it in the shoulder, in the foot, or somewhere else, it likely implies that you're not performing this exercise exactly how it's designed to be and exactly for the highest level of adaptation in your performance. So let's discuss how do we use the abdominals. So in this particular sequence, setting up in the elbow, setting up in our feet, a little cheat trick is to take your thumb and place it on the ribs. and to take your pinky finger and place it on the pelvis, basically to create a connection between those two major bones. When you lift, you want to feel like those fingers are squeezing together, right? Any muscle, its job is to pull two landmarks together, two bones together. So you should feel like this muscle is shortening as you elevate yourself into position. So landmarks with the pinky and with the thumb, feel them squeeze, feel them come together, and then feel that tension essentially wrapping around the bottom of the torso. So when you're holding your position, it should basically be wrapping around kind of this whole area from ribs to pelvis feels the majority of the work. So the final piece of information that is important. When we are walking around in everyday life, we have a straight line kind of from nose to belly button to middle of the feet, kind of a straight line through the body. Now we want to, at the very least, get to that straight line in our side plank. But because we're trying to train the muscle, because we're trying to specifically address its weakness and its position, we might go a little bit beyond perfectly parallel. Let me just quickly demonstrate. So in my setup, a perfectly straight line from nose to toes might be about here. But what I would prefer is a very slight hip hike, even just a little bit of an angle at the hips where we elevate slightly beyond. The metaphor, the analogy I like to use is imagine that you have a balloon on your hip and the balloon is pulling you up to the ceiling. It's pulling you just a little bit above and beyond that parallel line. So once again, there is a lot of information in this video, but it's important to recognize that this is a major foundational piece for our program going forward. So if you need to experiment, practice, take a video of yourself, or come to me for feedback, that is totally okay because we need to make sure this is done correct really early on.